All right, it is a minute after, so as people are hopping in, I'll get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on sustainable energy solutions. I'm Ailey Carson, Communications Specialist at Green Key Global, and I am joined alongside our partners at Bullfrog Power. So some housekeeping before we get started. This webinar is recorded and we'll be sending you a copy after. We do encourage you to use the chat throughout, and there will be time at the end for a Q&A to answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to drop anything in the chat along the way as well, and we can get to those at the end. So I'm joined today by Alex Onwoodiway, Sales and Account Manager at Bullfrog Power, as well as Joseph McNeil, Regional Sales Director at Bullfrog Power. Today, we're focusing on sustainability within the hospitality sector. Specifically, we'll be on organizational scope emissions and practical green energy solutions that can drive positive change. So our speakers will also share some energy solutions for the hospitality industry, and they'll get into some more specifics on that. With that, I'm going to welcome Alex to kick things off for us.
Thank you, Ailey. Good afternoon. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. And obviously, thank you to Green Key Global for facilitating this opportunity to speak with you all today. My name is Alex Onwoodiway, and I've been a sales and account manager with Bullfrog Power for a little over 2 years now. In my role, I work predominantly with small to medium-sized businesses with an additional focus on a few key areas like film and television, craft brewing, and the broader hospitality industry overall. I typically don't spend too much time speaking about my own background, but given the audience today, I thought it might be worth mentioning it a little here. I'm a longtime hospitality veteran coming from about 18 years in the food and beverage space before making my transition to a more sustainability-focused career. I've been managing bars and restaurants in Toronto for the majority of that time, and in 2017, started developing zero-waste cocktail programs in an attempt to mitigate the immense amount of waste that came from the establishments I worked in long before I really kind of understood how sustainability could fit into the bigger picture. Our goal today is to provide you with a better understanding of scope emissions, how they relate to your organization's impacts, and dive into who we are and how we can support your goals. We'll outline some of the best practices and solutions that already exist for you to deploy in your organization's sustainability journey and leave some room for some Q&A at the end. And yeah, with that, I will pass it on to Joseph here to introduce himself and lead us in.
Thank you very much, Alex. And hello, everybody. Nice to be here today. Thanks for joining us. So as Zach said, my name is Joseph McNeil. I'm a regional sales director at Bullfrog Power and have been for just about 6 years. Basically have the same sort of cover the same sort of things as Alex does on a few different sectors, and work primarily in the medium to large commercial space. So kind of a little bit of experience across the board in terms of sectors, but certainly in the hospitality industry is one of those. So jumping in, the overall topic and theme that we're looking at today, obviously, is solutions around green energy for your overall sustainability plan and how that can be used to mitigate and to help your carbon footprinting and things like that. But sort of stepping back a little bit for the bigger picture and Bullfrog specifically, and what we're all about is coming back to this sort of quote that you see on the bottom here by the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is that we are at a crossroads as a planet. And Bullfrog was founded to try and help make that transition to a sustainable, low carbon economy. And so the essence of what we do is try to find ways to facilitate green energy, both on the consumer and on the production side, and show organizations how they can use that to work towards their own sustainability plans. So a sort of a nice bonus and a corollary to that is the fact that we can also speak to the fact that it's not just a decision based solely on criteria of sustainability and eco-friendliness, because the case is becoming more and more clear and more stark that companies that do focus on sustainability, that do lead the pack on sustainability, across the board perform better financially. Green companies earn better, perform better on the stock market, and provide investor returns on the whole ahead of companies that don't. So the bonus about the entire thing is that it's not a either or decision on whether to be green or to be profitable and revenue focused, because the two go hand in hand. So that sort of setting the scene, I'll pass it back over to Alex to dive a little bit about the specifics of our solutions set for ourselves, and sort of how they relate to emissions reductions and scope emissions.
For those of you who might not be as familiar with us, we're a renewable energy company, as was kind of just mentioned. We were working in the space for almost 20 years, 20 years as of next year, actually. Bullfrog was founded in 2005 with the goal to transform Canada's electricity landscape, with the belief that everybody should be able to access green energy. Positioned behind this goal, we became the first company to offer green electricity choice for businesses and homes across Canada. And in the early days, we started very much in like a door-to-door canvassing kind of style and approach, bringing awareness to how we power our daily lives and the need to shift to more renewable sources such as wind, solar, low-impact hydro. Through the purchase of RECs, which are renewable energy certificates, sometimes referred to as GECs or green electricity certificates, RTCs being renewable thermal certificates, which we'll get into more later, we ensure that green energy is being put onto the grid on our clients' behalf from renewable sources. Last year, we passed the impressive milestone of displacing over 2 million tons of CO2 through our partnerships with over 1,500 businesses and the support of over 160 community projects. We are a B Corp, certified B Corp, CDP accredited provider. We're audited annually. And additionally, we have longstanding partnerships with the Pembina Institute and WWF. We have several ways in which we can help our clients achieve their sustainability goals. For today, we'll be focusing on the first two columns you should see here on the screen: renewable energy certificates and carbon offsets. RECs are market-based instruments that are used to address the areas of an organization's carbon footprint. Their attributes are measured, matched, audited, and retired, and they are recognized internationally as a way to mitigate carbon emissions that stem from your operational impacts. We offer green electricity and green natural gas solutions, which can be used to address Scope 2 and Scope 1 emissions, respectively. Our green electricity RECs are Eco-Logo and Green E certified, and as mentioned, come from wind, solar, and low-impact hydro projects. They meet the highest standards of RECs available, and their criteria include a strong chain of custody, allowing them to be retired in your organization's name and to be included in your reporting and sustainability initiatives, which are obviously becoming much more prevalent nowadays. Regionality, meaning that you're sourcing and retiring RECs from connected grids versus elsewhere overseas, for example. And additionality, meaning that the project or activity that reduces the greenhouse gas emissions would not have existed essentially, or not have happened without the buyer or collective buyers in the market. But yeah, with that, we're gonna kind of dive into a little bit more of the scope emissions, and I'm gonna hand it back over to Joseph now.
Thank you, Alex. The term scope emissions was coined, or first appeared in the Greenhouse Gas Protocol of 2001. And it's used as a way, or as a basis to obviously categorize the types of emissions for HGHG reporting, for greenhouse gas reporting. So there's three scopes. The first is Scope 1. What's defined as direct emissions, so emissions from owned or controlled sources. So in the hospitality, this is typically things like natural gas that's burned in your kitchen. So the emissions are coming from the burning of the gas in your kitchen, or in the in the fireplace of the hotel, etc. Also, fuel used for equipment on site, if it's owned equipment, like gasoline for shuttle buses or what have you. So Scope 1 emissions that are caused on site. Scope 2 are indirect emissions. So emissions that are coming from energy consumption that you are consuming, but the generation is offsite. So 99% of the time, this is going to be from electricity generation. So scope 2 would be from the electricity that you use that's generated, out in the grid somewhere from a gas plant or a nuclear or a large hydro or what have you. Or wind or solar. So the emissions that are a result of that mix of generation sources would be categorized as scope 2. And then I'll leave scope 3 for Alex to get into in a little bit more detail, but scope 3, the real cliff notes on that one is scope 3 is stuff that's indirect emissions that's in your value chain. So emissions that are happening from activities that are either upstream or downstream supply chain. So if you're delivering stuff or you're having stuff delivered to you, the emissions associated with the both sides of that would be considered scope 3, and I'll let us get into the meat of that. But talking about what you can do in terms of renewable energy to deal with these emissions. So scope 1 and scope 2 is relatively straightforward. And there's a sort of a established mechanism in place to and when it comes to at least GHG reporting, to be able to reduce or mitigate or avoid your scope 1 and your scope 2 emissions by means of renewable energy solutions, such as electricity RECs, green electricity, or RECs, or renewable energy certificates. And in the same side on the scope 1 would be renewable thermal certificates, so green natural gas. Bullfrog obviously provides both of those. So we have sort of a bead on the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions reductions solutions. We also, as you can see from the slide, have options that can be applied to scope 3, and they're also have the carbon offsets, which are sort of the next step down on the hierarchy of the emissions reduction sort of best practices. In that, if you have emissions that cannot be abated or mitigated by other means, such as green energy or conservation and efficiency, then carbon offsets are a way to deal with those emissions for certain cases. And the very obvious and most applied cases for corporate travel, air travel, that there's no such, there's not a way to avoid that with a green fuel yet. So I think we'll push on to the next one and go back into a little bit deeper dive on scope 3, if I'm correct here.
Yeah, I can do it. Juggling the different screens is always fun on these things. So
yeah.
All right. So now on to scope 3 emissions, considered definitely the most challenging area of an organization's operational impacts. For those of you who might have attended a previous webinar I participated in, I only briefly touched upon this. Typically makes up more than 70% plus of a company's GHG footprint. So probably one of the reasons why it always kind of gets pushed back as far as, it's complicated. It's a much more messy area to address. But scope 3 emissions, as just was mentioning earlier, include all other indirect emissions that occur in a company's value chain. So including but not limited to the upstream activities such as purchased goods and services, transportation and distribution, business travel, employee commuting, and downstream activities such as the processing of goods, like sold products, use of sold products, end-of-life treatment of sold products, basically everything to do with your sold products on the downstream. Organizations will typically have this sort of data available to them, which allows them to convert direct purchases of gas and electricity into a value that can be understood and measured as tons of CO2. Depending on the structure of your organization, this information will normally live with procurement or finance, property management, and now more regularly in like an actual dedicated sustainability role. As industry professionals, understanding these concepts is crucial for driving sustainability throughout your operations and can also benefit other areas of your business by highlighting and communicating these initiatives you look to take action on. Scope 3 emissions are the epitome of those hard to reach areas of an organization, but there are ways in which we can help there too. I do want to preface by saying that the carbon offset market is a messy one, and you really want to make sure that when sourcing them as part of your solutions, that they are well vetted and meet the criteria you're requiring based on your individual goals and what they might be. We at Bullfrog are obviously big supporters of nature and the environment. However, we don't source any nature-based offset projects as they don't fully meet kind of our strict criteria, being additionality, permanence, and measurability. For example, our team have been out tree planting collectively together and are all in agreement that it's very much an initiative that needs to continue around the world. Ongoing, like no one's going to make an argument about that clearly. But it is very difficult to guarantee, for example, how many trees are going to survive. They take 10 to 15 years to reach maturity and start really sequestering carbon, and other varying factors that have led us to determining that their true measurability is difficult to account for. And we want to, of course, always offer our partners the ability to feel confident knowing that they're purchasing the highest quality options that meet all of the requirements where offsets are available. As Joseph was briefly mentioning or kind of touched upon the hierarchy, I think this is a really kind of great example of how, not just what we kind of try to honor throughout our approaches when we work with our clients, but just in general, the best practices as far as the industry goes. So, where does that leave us? Well, at Bullfrog, we like to align how we work with our clients by balancing, their own goals with the best practices outlined by industry leaders and official guidance like the GHG protocol, for example. Our own approach begins with striving to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels and electricity at the source. So essentially, like before you even talk to folks like us, this circles back to working within what we have control over. The next step is to replace them with renewable alternatives. This could be through the installation of solar panels or the purchase of RECs, such as green electricity or green natural gas solutions like we have. And then the next step, as you'll see, is to offset the remaining unavoidable emissions, meaning we deploy the use of offsets once the first two steps have been addressed to the best of our ability and, of course, within our means. Essentially, this hierarchy that you can see here serves as like a checklist or a guide for where to start and the stages you can progress through when developing your roadmap for your goals. And I'm going to pass it back on to Joseph.
All right, thank you. So switching gears a little bit here, and we'll get into some of the sort of the nitty-gritty, I guess, of if you're going to talk about, for instance, renewable electricity to address your Scope 1 emissions, what's the best way to go about it? Why RECs? Why Bullfrog? What are the options? So there's really only two main methods to be able to procure or choose renewable electricity. So the first would be what the mind tends to jump to automatically is, why not use solar panels on the roof or a local wind farm or something like that, where what's typically referred to as on-site or self-generated green electricity. So that's option number one. And then the other option is to do something like what Bullfrog offers, is what's called off-site renewable energy or RECs or market instruments. There's sort of a couple different names for them, as Alex spoke to originally. So the fundamental difference obviously is one is generated on site and the other is off-site. So the pros and cons of each are pretty self-evident in the fact that most organizations don't have anywhere near the space, either rooftop space or ground space around their facility or building to be able to have any sort of generation capacity that's going to match up anywhere near the actual consumption that they're doing for electricity. So it's 99% of the time not feasible to be able to generate on-site electricity of your own, green electricity of your own, just because of the geography of if like in a city and you're in a building surrounded by others and you just don't have the space. It works for warehouses, schools, that type of thing. There's a few certain sort of niche situations where on-site rooftop solars and that type of thing does work. The pros, if you can do that, is it's fantastic in terms of the key metrics that we look at, like additionality and permanence, and it's a great story to tell, in that you can point specifically to an actual, project. It's got a good feel-good element to it. The cons are that it's typically a large upfront capital investment. There's a big spend to kind of get the thing built, or a need for financing. There's certain the sort of economics of how your utility bill is rated, depending on what's going to have a big factor in whether it's going to be something that saves money quicker or slower, or if at all. And then, of course, the giant con would be it's a very specific situation where that's going to actually be possible to actually build. Going up to offsite renewable energy, the great thing about that is, because you're purchasing electricity that's generated somewhere else in the grid, you can apply it to anywhere and everywhere. So no matter what the situation is in terms of how much you're consuming, where you're located, what your profile is, and if you're using a lot at night or a lot at in the day, what have you. You can match that with RECs, and completely account for 100% of your consumption to be matched with 100% of green energy to match it. So the ease of implementation is fantastic. It's literally you can make the decision, and within a couple of days you can be sort of up and running with RECs or market instruments for your green energy. It's an OpEx cost, so there's no upfront capital, no investment required. It's something that can be a sort of a bridge solution while you're looking into physical upgrades that are going to change your emissions and your consumption footprint, such as infrastructure upgrades with efficiencies and new equipment and things like that. Electrification of heating, for instance. Or sorry, not heating, but yes, sorry. And the only con would be it is an ongoing OpEx cost, so there's not something that's going to be an ROI sort of calculation involved. And the storytelling aspect of it sometimes is not as easy to portray to or convey to your stakeholders, because it's a bit of it's a non-intuitive idea where that you're still consuming electricity from the grid, yet you're also greening that electricity by matching it with RECs. And it's not the most easy to communicate to your customers and stakeholders to be able to have as it would be to point to, say, a solar farm on the roof. But so each has their their pros and cons. But in terms of the hospitality industry in general, and sort of corporations, the method of using offsite renewable energy and RECs is essentially the de facto go-to solution the majority of the time. So I hope that wasn't too much in the weeds right there. I'll switch, move along here to I guess we'll broaden back out again a little bit in terms of, rather than focus too much on specifics of the nuts and bolts of renewable electricity, for example. Let's back up and say, what are the general sustainability challenges that are facing organizations? So what we find is a lot of companies take a look at sustainability and ESG, or what have you, and there's so many different facets to it. It sometimes can be a little bit overwhelming, and people are at a loss of where do we start? What's the best thing to focus our energy on at first? How do we allocate this type of time or bandwidth to existing staff if we don't have somebody dedicated, as a sustainability person. So if this is something you want to, if you have specific questions or you're noticing, this type of these type of things popping up as your sustainability plans are being considered or happening at pace, we'd love to hear a little bit more about specific questions you have about that that may or may not relate to these ones. You can fire them into the chat there, or we can, or if we have a little verbal Q&A at the end, you can raise your hand for that as well. The reason we want to talk about this is because what we offer at Bullfrog is solutions to help deal with the ancillary sort of issues that come along with with making a green energy commitment. And so a lot of the time, these are the questions that come up. So, how do we leverage this spend? How do we communicate this to our stakeholders? How do we ensure that we're reporting properly and sort of getting the benefit of this of a commitment we've made to green energy and to emissions reductions reporting, emissions reductions targets and goals. So that's a big part of what Bullfrog does as well too. And I guess I'll just maybe, if I could kick it to the next slide, Alex. Oh, sorry, you're already on it. I was looking at that one. The Bullfrog value prop, I guess you would say, is what we try to do is make sure that we're helping you communicate and tell your sustainability story. So aside from just providing and delivering the green energy, we want to make sure that we're helping you with the questions that come along and challenges that come along with it. So brand engagement, social media content, press releases, employee engagement, lunch and learns, what have you. What we strive to make sure that we deliver, or we make available at least, is a sort of a suite of solutions and an expertise and content that enables you to make the most of a choice to purchase green energy or offsets or what have you, without having to put in as much work as you might have to otherwise. So essentially, we're here to provide the expertise, the content, the third-party validation, the reporting metrics, what have you, to help go along with your, if you choose to go with green energy through Bullfrog or even if you're just using some of the other solutions that are part of your overall sustainability plan. So, long story short, there's more to it than just the delivery of a commodity. Although obviously that's very, very key, is making sure that you're having something that's high quality and vetted and verified and audited. But the other side of the coin, in terms of leveraging that spend and that commitment and helping communicate to stakeholders, internal and external, is a big part of what we at Bullfrog do to try and differentiate ourselves and help present a unique value in the marketplace. So yeah, I'll stop talking now. Yeah, maybe I'll turn it back over to Alex and we'll talk a little bit about I guess specifics geared a little bit more towards the hospitality industry, so stuff we've done before and that we recommend and that are I won't call it low-hanging fruit, but good examples of things that are applicable to the hospitality space.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so I've got a few slides here that are, taking kind of everything we've chatted here today, as well as some past experiences working with different partners and so on, to really kind of show you how it has a long history of working in the real world, and kind of get you thinking about some ideas outside the box that we can work on. But very high level, Bullfrog powered common spaces. So we've worked with several hotels for many years to decarbonize their common spaces. This could look, this takes the form of front lobbies, the fireplaces, the restaurants that are adjacent to the front entranceways. For example, EV chargers has been an increased popularity or an increased area that, depending on your region has been, we've had a lot more inquiries about, let's say, and meeting rooms. There are so many areas to address under the sustainability umbrella. As Joseph was saying earlier, it can very much be overwhelming at times. My advice would be to ask questions and make educated decisions that can help you progress towards your goals, because you're not the only ones doing that. There's probably a precedent for some of these questions. And if there isn't, that's probably a good thing, because, you're obviously on the cusp of, really trying to explore and make your way down that roadmap for yourselves. When it comes to addressing your carbon footprint, some key things to remember are that Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are the ones that we have the most control over, and therefore the, ones that we have the most responsibility to manage where and when we can. We have some impressive examples of different clients that have incorporated our solutions into their operations and have built them into their initiatives to showcase meaningful efforts and change the way we look at our operations. The image that you should see up here is actually of the Westin in downtown Ottawa, which is Bullfrog powered their front lobby fireplaces since 2014. So quite a little run on that. Similarly, the Fairmont Royal York in Toronto also has their fireplaces Bullfrog powered. The Eddy, which is a boutique hotel out in Prince Edward County, just a couple hours outside of Toronto, has Bullfrog powered their entire space since 2021. And we previously had a long-running partnership, but I really think it's worth mentioning with the Gladstone Hotel here in Toronto as well, where they were addressing the whole property. I like to point to this one because they were actually including a small environmental fee, for example, on every guest stay, which helped them budget for the initiative and was clearly outlined so the guests were both aware, and it was an education opportunity on the efforts that were made to be more sustainable in their day-to-day operations. The why is an important feature, and why we do this and how we choose to communicate it can all support the long and short-term business case. As Joseph mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's plenty of supporting data that points to organizations benefiting from adopting more sustainable approaches to their operations and developing a roadmap that really strives to make changes in meaningful ways. Something to keep in mind is that regardless of where you are on that journey, it doesn't have to be like an all or nothing endeavor. We can address specific areas of your operations that are, and honestly, that's kind of my favorite thing to do, is to get kind of creative with how, how that can take shape. I mentioned the EV chargers. I think that's a great example. We have a few, albeit like growing interest in Bullfrog powering EV chargers, which may not sound super obvious because they are electrified, tied to, hybrid or electric cars, but particularly in provinces where the grids have higher emission factors, that's something that has become a point of contention to kind of make a full circle project out of that initiative in itself. Deploying our solutions to augment an existing green initiative, for example, like installing EV chargers, is a great way to think outside the box while creating a narrative around the efforts that can be shared by employees who are passionate about what they do and can speak to your eclectic revolving door of people who are coming to stay at your establishments. Doubling down on like the meeting room side of things, because I think I can't see any of you, but assuming that many of you are from the hotel industry, that I would be very surprised if this hasn't come about at some point. Bullfrog powered meeting rooms have a proven track record with us, and have more recently been generating a lot more interest from several hotels and conference centers, whether they're looking for ways to expand on their existing sustainability offerings or in response to increasing inquiries from their own guests. The picture you see in this photo over here, they were thoughtful. It wasn't just random clip art, but it's actually from the Hilton in downtown Vancouver, who've been a Bullfrog Power customer, powering their meeting rooms with both green electricity and green natural gas, dating back to 2015, actually. The Metro Toronto Convention Center here is another great example of a long-standing partnership we have that leverages our green energy solutions to differentiate their brand and enhance their offerings for the many events that pass through their multifaceted facilities each year. Developing a meeting rooms program is a straightforward example of how our green energy solutions can really embody a truly kind of turnkey initiative and don't need to be that whole all or nothing endeavor I kind of spoke to. It can be a great starting place or a complementary piece for your strategy. Though I'm sure a large majority of the audience here work in the hotel side of the industry, I want to take a moment to highlight some impressive partners that you might already work with or might have heard of, starting with several Bullfrog-powered breweries across the country, like Grizzly Paw, Sleeping Giant, Garrison Brewing, Aveling Brewing, and the recently joined Good Lot Farmstead Brewing, and of course, many more. These are just a few of the many partnerships that you can also leverage, kind of like working within the Bullfrog Power community, and, you know, tapping into that community, no puns intended. But, you know, many of your locations are going to be, you know, across the country, and there's so many great local offerings. And I know there's, you know, a lot of big contracts that sometimes come with, like, you know, the offerings that you have in your on your taps, for example. But more and more we're seeing inclusions of craft beers and so on. Well, why not partner with someone that is also has this, or also contains the same kind of values and same kind of drives to some of the operations that they've tried to do. And, you know, again, there's a whole portfolio of people that we work with that really kind of help connect and bolster and build out what you're already trying to do. And, you know, that communication on that stakeholder side, whether it's external or internal, makes for that kind of storytelling element. Many of you probably know, if you've sat at the bar at your space, like, there's conversations that happen all of the time. You know, where are you from? What's going on? What should I drink? I mean, every time I go somewhere, I always ask what's the local craft beer I should try, because I'm always curious. It's things we can't get back in other regions. So that being, you know, a very kind of specific example, but I think a really cool connectivity between the communities and just really building out the networks. And just was kind of mentioning this before, but really kind of didn't want to, or I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how we work with our clients beyond supporting their decarbonization targets. Although it's great to see there's clearly a shift towards more concerted efforts by organizations to develop and deploy meaningful initiatives, we very much understand that communicating and speaking to these efforts are not necessarily part of the, you know, everyday job descriptions for most organizations. Our marketing team does a great job of, you know, working. You can see a few examples over here of working with a whole different slew of entities to really try to like amplify the efforts that are being done. And, you know, that in itself is such a, I mean, I look at it as such a huge added value outside of the great initiatives you're doing. It's like, how do we, it's one thing to do it, and, you know, it's excellent that folks are moving towards this, but how do we actually, like, you know, leverage this and build out that value? Because these tools are there, and, you know, we've worked with folks for a long time that sometimes they need a little bit of refresher to be like, hey, you know, maybe this could be a really good idea. Or if they've seen you know, other initiatives or other communications we've done with other companies, and that sparks some interest, like, hey, how can we do this? With that being said, I've also worked for organizations that won't be, no, I'm not here to name anything, that charge a arm and a leg, let's just say, for use of the logo. And that's not something that we do. We're very kind of proud. In fact, we love when organizations like choose to highlight our partnership and are proud to be featured across many of their communications, the storefronts, their products. One of the previous slides you saw, you know, Bullfrog brewed in a Bullfrog powered facility for one of the craft beer products, for example, from Grizzly Paw, who literally has our logo on their can. Of course, you know, there's guidelines. We want to make sure that the claims are very true, but that on its own does a, you know, a lot of heavy lifting from purposes of marketing. So often we get into conversations and folks will say, you know, I don't really know what Bullfrog is, but I recognize it. I have this positive affiliation. I buy my eggs or my beer or whatever it might be because I see that logo. So again, it's like, you know, tapping into that community and really leveraging the network that that exists. On this slide here, you'll see a few examples of the ways that we've worked with our partners in the past. Some notable mentions are Pour magazine. I had actually done an interview with them a couple of years ago, and they highlighted a few of our partners and so on, and just, you know, what's going on, what's the green energy for, you know, alcohol producers, or what's the situation with green energy for alcohol producers. Hotelier magazine, another popular one. And then every year we do an eclectic spread with many of our, you know, not specifically the hospitality side of things, but with the Globe and Mail that highlights a ton of our different partnerships that we work with. And it's not just, you know, the larger commercial ones, it's all shapes and sizes, because we really do take pride, including some of the current campaigns we have going on, if you've looked at any of our social media, of trying to highlight all of the different industries that we work with. And, you know, it's great advertisement for them. It's great ways to leverage the partnerships, and again, just builds out that community. There are several customized initiatives we've helped our partners with, highlighting both the physical, both physically in-house and digitally based on their needs, as I was kind of mentioning. Something we're always happy to get creative with, and again, amplify those efforts through the community and broader industry. On that note, one final thing I'd like to point to is the community element I've been talking about. Your, you know, establishments all represent a collective meeting ground, an opportunity for, you know, to support local businesses and showcase, you know, whether it's craft breweries, distilleries, wineries. I mean, I don't know, maybe you have a gift shop. You sell, you know, local trinkets, what it might be. I don't know what they sell in gift shops nowadays, but in general, I really think that is, you know, aside from the day-to-day things we speak about trying to address the, you know, the impacts of an organization, there's so much more outside of it that can really be pieced together to build out a really cool program, you know, as you try to find ways to, you know, decarbonize and hit those goals. With that, do we have any questions, answers? Thank you all, by the way, for your patience with that.
We had a couple questions come in the chat, Alex and Joseph. So one of them was from Michael Gagnon. He was wondering two questions, actually. One is, our business is situated in Eastern Canada. Wind, solar, or hydropower can't sustain individually the need for their business. Do you have any studies with hybrid systems for Eastern Canada climate?
I can if I understand it, I can speak to that one a little bit. And Michael, you can pipe up if I'm misunderstanding the question here. But what you're saying is you're not able to get wind or solar or hydro locally for your business, just due to the mix of the grid in Eastern. Are you in the Maritimes or Quebec, or either way? The great thing about off-site renewable energy, which Bullfrog does, RECs in general, is the fact that it's completely regional location agnostic, basically. So the nature of it is such that as long as you're drawing your power from the whatever your local energy grid is, that is connected to the larger North American grid itself, which is entirely interconnected through the continent, basically. So there is what's called a theoretical path, where an electron that's generated from a source anywhere that's connected to that grid could theoretically find its way to your consumption. So with that criteria being met, you can purchase green energy that's being generated anywhere, that can be applied to your consumption anywhere in North America. So the best practice is you want to try and find a green energy that's been generated locally, if possible, but it's not always possible. And this is probably a specific case example right there. So but what you can still do is find generation that's been generated somewhere within maybe your same region, within the Maritimes, within your same what's called regional power pool, which is Canada is broken up into, I think, 5 sort of north. They're called NERC regions, essentially Western Canada, Central Canada, Ontario, and Eastern Canada, Quebec. That if the power is generated, if the renewable energy is generated within that same region, then it has an impact in your. It's impactful to your that you're purchasing and consuming and retiring the environmental attributes from that green energy. So all that to say, the great thing, or the one of the benefits to using and purchasing this type of renewable energy is you don't need to be close to the source, and you can, wherever you're located, you can purchase green energy through Bullfrog and how to apply it to that location. So I hope that sort of answers your question. But feel free to ping us after the fact if you want to delve a little deeper. And if I misunderstood the whole thing, let me know.
And Michael will also have their contact information in a follow-up. So if you have any more questions on that matter, feel free to ask them in that format as well. And Michael had another question. So he wanted to know if you're knowledgeable about any government financing for changes towards a greener energy consumption.
I'm going to let Joseph take this because I know it's a bit, I'm going to hand it off to you. It's a question we get a lot. I'm hoping there's a lot more coming down the pipeline soon, in short, but I think Joseph might be able to answer a little more succinctly on that side of things than I will, anyway.
Don't put me in the hook for succinct. So we are knowledgeable of government financing at a few different levels. So the problem is there's There's a sort of amalgam of incentives and initiatives and rebates and tax breaks and things like that that are at the municipal level, the provincial level, and the federal level. They're changing fairly often, usually with with the government with elections. New government comes in, priorities shift, things like that. So we don't have say like a Bullfrog vetted list that we would be able to pass along in terms of here's based on where you are, here's what you should make sure to take advantage of or to go apply for in terms of incentives and rebates and things like that. But we oftentimes have so anecdotally done some digging and research as part of our interactions and fact finding and stuff for prospects and customers, just as part of due diligence, basically. So, yeah, that's probably not really a good answer, and the fact that we know of it. It's case by case, where it makes sense. The real time that comes to the fore is when we're talking about not necessarily RECs / offsite green energy, is when we're working with a larger institutional industrial customer that's looking at doing something physical, an on-site wind or solar farm or things like that, where the incentives that are currently available can make a really, really big impact on the capital cost of the project. But that's a small sort of subset of our customers, not generally our focus area. So on the overall government incentives for choosing green energy, period, is a little bit out of scope for us, but we certainly make efforts to keep up to date with it and make customers aware of it, where it where it could make a difference for them.
Awesome. So we have a few more questions in the pipeline. So one of them is from Leslie Robb. Can an event organizer request a Bullfrog powered space specifically for their event at a venue or hotel if the hotel doesn't already offer one?
That's a really good question. This short answer is like yes, and in the nature of like how we work, like it is doable. The event specific scenarios are something that is it's kind of a case by case. We do it all the time, to be clear. But the individual entity that is looking to do that, it depends on the scenario and what the reason why it's a little bit of gray area is. Typically this is something that can be done a lot more let's just say like fluidly when it's working with one of our existing customers that, let's say, maybe they've just powered their office or something. And again, this ties back into that. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. The event case by case, then it's easier for us to do these offshoots of these one-time purchases for events. So the short answer is yes, but it does get a little bit complicated in these, one-off situations, but absolutely, because it is done all the time. That's something I'd encourage, reach out to us. We can learn a little bit more about what you're trying to do, and I can provide a little bit more parameters to kind of how that works. Or and again, there's a whole suite of benefits to doing that and looking at it in the big picture as to how you can do that, even if they're 2 or 3 events a year and so on and so forth. But definitely something that can be done is the short answer, I would say.
That's awesome. Another question is from Ronald Usi. He wants to know, what are the most common concerns or objections that you hear from hospitality businesses when considering solar, and how do you address those concerns?
I feel like we can probably both speak to this a little bit, but the very obvious answer right off the top of the bat is always cost. It's always going to be a big factor in that. Budget is definitely an obstacle, and kind of to circle back to that, the pros and cons slide that we were looking at. Something I often say, and I don't think I mentioned it once during the presentation, Bullfrog, for example, should be, I like folks to look at Bullfrog as very much like a tool in your toolkit. There's so many different areas that you need to address under the sustainability umbrella. Energy is definitely one of those like more difficult ones for the most part. So to have a tool that can address those like hard to reach areas, especially once folks start to understand how it can be deployed, becomes like incredibly invaluable as far as something that a tool that you can use to address an area of things, even if it is in the interim, because you maybe have plans to install a solar array. Maybe that's coming up in the future. You have solutions that can be deployed essentially yesterday, and bridge some of those gaps along there. I feel like I went on a bit of a tangent on answering a little bit of that, but I'm like circling back to the question just to make sure I can kind of answer something, because I also think we missed one, but.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I fully answered that, but I also just lost the chat for a second. So I want to make sure, I think that we skipped over one or two. And I also, if we run out of time here today, I want to be conscientious of it. Please feel free to reach out to us. We'll probably try to reach out to you after. I'm happy to, hop on a call, answer some more questions as well if we do run out of time today. Because I see a few good ones coming in here as well. I just want to make sure. Ailey, thanks for your help as well with moderating some
Yeah.
of them.
No problem. We have two from Liz Baum that were in the, sorry if I
Yes, I think
mispronounced her
those are the
last name.
ones that I had seen.
Yeah, I see them in the Q&A too. I can ask them for you. So that first one is, what partnership opportunities are appearing or would you like to explore at the intersection of renewable energy and the growing movement to reduce food waste in the hospitality and food and beverage industry? That's a really good question.
That's a great question, but go ahead. I have my own 2 cents about it that like have nothing to do with Bullfrog, kind of, but also like, but go ahead.
So one thing I really love about that question is it actually dovetails with what's new and exciting here at Bullfrog, in that we I guess not that new, in that we were acquired by our new parent company, Invest Corp, about 2 years ago. And quite literally, that's what Invest is at the forefront of, is renewable energy generation via waste streams. So the intersection of reducing waste, or at least diverting waste from landfill to through the green bin program, for instance, which that waste goes into a biodigester, and out comes renewable natural gas that gets used to power a greenhouse, or that goes into our mix for our source greenhouse gas solution that we have. Kind of hits the nail on the head right there. So it's without being glad of lots of waste coming in, because that's a sort of a feedstock for us. We are expanding through Invest, not technically Bullfrog specifically, but through Invest, the ability to harness and some of that organic waste, and make sure it's not going to landfill. It's getting to energy generation processing station, rather than going into a landfill where it would still decompose and still release methane, which is a horrible greenhouse gas. So the food and beverage industry is well aware, and grocery stores and the like, and conference event centers like the MTCC and things like that have and the ACC and things that have these huge amounts of food waste are front and center in that conversation, and making sure that where possible, this change is happening, the waste to energy sort of cycle, as opposed to into landfill. So again, it's sort of tangential to Bullfrog, but it certainly is. It does have a very significant touch point where, with our green natural gas product solution, is quite literally coming from this food waste energy harnessing. So yeah, that's my 2 cents about that, which was probably about $1.50. Sorry for taking so much time. If you want to hop in there on that one, Alex, fire away.
Yeah, I saw the second part of the question there too. Again, honestly, a really great question. I think Joseph handled a lot of the from the scope perspective of Bullfrog as well. But speaking, more broadly, again, coming from background that I would, there's a lot of people that are struggling, and there are a lot of great resources for trying to divert food waste, especially because we know many folks come through these spaces and let's just say over purchase in a lot of ways. So aside from the actual food waste, there's so much that could be donated. And Ailey, I know you and your team last year connected. My brother happens to work part-time at a great entity out here called Second Harvest, and I know you and your team went out there and helped. So them, along with many other organizations, have great chapters where they, can collect food that essentially wasn't touched, wasn't, basically contaminated in any way, to go to those who are less fortunate. So, as a first line of defense, I think that's a great initiative to do, and again, can be built into a lot of the programs that you're doing. And then you look for other, entities, whether it's the, offsets that you might be looking at, or different projects you're looking at, again, through some of the things that we're doing with our parent company, to find channels to at least steer your waste into those directions, knowing that they'll go to a better place, so to say, rather than just end up in landfill. I know there was a second question that you had there, which is very close to my heart, which is the whole music festival, outdoor events, and so on. This is something that has I've been pursuing for the last little while. There's definitely an appetite for it. This year, we actually had a really exciting partnership with Pride Toronto, powering some of their stages. We have a long-standing partnership with the Junos, for example, like many, many years powering their events, as well as Luminato Festival. So there are ways to integrate what we do into these one-off events, which again kind of ties into that first question where I was like, yeah, it gets a little bit messy, but it's doable, absolutely. And this is a space that we definitely want to continue to build out. I'm, personally in conversations with a lot of and I'm saying this under a broader umbrella, but the film and television industry, a lot of, the live music industry in general, because there is a lot of appetite for trying to find these solutions, but we also understand it's not your day-to-day business to do this. I mean, many people are finding themselves in these roles, but I think in the coming months, aside from, some strategies that I'm personally trying to put together, I think there'll be a lot more of a concrete roadmap ahead for how to address different areas. And, once that starts to be taken up a little bit more, there'll be more and more of an appetite for that. And I think, as things evolve, there'll be more opportunity in that area. So not a full answer, but yes, the short answer is we're definitely trying to address that. And there's more coming down the way. Short answer right now on one of the questions. I know we are running a little bit tight on time, but Ailey, you keep me posted on that. I think Abby had a question about if we operate in the US as well. We, as of very recently, the last year or so, have begun to work and operate in the US. It is definitely something you want to reach out to us and talk, because it is a case by case. We have a long history in Canada, obviously, and a newer, foray into the US side of things. But it's definitely something that we are actively doing or already doing. But it's not as big of a splash, obviously, as we've had with the 20-year track record in Canada.
And real quick to the second part of your question, Abdi, is the arrangements with solar farms that you can tap into. That's part of the legacy that we have in Canada. Is yes, we have solar farms that we have longstanding agreements with. We have virtual power purchase agreements with some ones in Alberta specifically that we offer as part of our mix of solutions and sources for our customers. So that would be something you could quite literally tap into. Whereas in the US, we don't have sort of existing solar farms or wind farms that we have, sort of a continuous or an ongoing relationship with. It's more, again, this is sort of case by case. But yeah, so, the answer is yes and yes.
Awesome. So that's all the questions that we have, and we're actually at time right on the dot. So I just want to say thank you so much, Alex and Joseph. That was a really great presentation. There's so many key takeaways for hotels, and I really like the real world examples that you shared. I think it's really good to put it into perspective. So thank you again for joining us today, and thank you everybody who took the time to be here. As a reminder, we will be sending a follow-up with a recording to all attendees, so keep your eyes open for that, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Haley.